In this brief nugget, we're just going to discuss something called Windows to Go, which is a great new way of taking a portable copy of Windows with you when you don't have a laptop or any other kind of a device. Also very useful if you have a corporate desktop that you need to use on your own personal computer. Earlier this year, my wife and I signed up my son for these special courses called Cotillion. I'd never heard of it before, but apparently it's where they teach young men how to treat ladies as young ladies and be gentlemen and have good table manners and be polite and whatnot. Apparently, my wife didn't think I was teaching my son much in any of those regards. So anyway, at the end of the whole course, they also have a dance. They teach them how to dance too, and the parents are all invited. So we have to go there and humiliate ourselves by attempting to dance. And there I am, attempting to dance, even though it looks like I'm just marching in place. And that's kind of what I do when I dance anyway. I just kind of shuffle my feet a little bit. Anyway, this is what I call James to go, and I wish that I could have been somewhere else at this very moment, even though I looked like I was happy for some reason or another. Well, fortunately, with Windows, we do have the ability to make it go somewhere else, and that's what we call Windows to go. All right, let's address this issue with Windows to Go. First of all, it really addresses a problem. It reminds me of when I first started training years and years ago. This was back in the days of NT4, and I used to do these seminars with hundreds of people in the audience, sometimes upwards of 1,000. It would be in convention centers and things like this. We used to have to take with us 3 Tecra laptops, Toshiba laptops. And because we didn't have virtualization back then, at least not that was very good. And so we would have to flip back and forth using an A-B switch and stuff like that, I guess an ABC switch really, between each one of the 3 machines anytime we wanted to demonstrate something, whether it was on a different operating system or on a different server, something like this. So we also had these hard drives that we would be able to swap out and to show even more variety in the machines that we were working with. Well, Windows to Go, in addition to virtualization, of course, would have gone a long ways to helping us in that situation, because instead of having to swap out hard drives or even sometimes going to a different laptop entirely, I could actually boot to a Windows to Go drive and have a full copy of Windows. So that's one issue. It just reminds me of that. I don't really have it written down here anywhere in the whiteboard, but it does also address a problem that we currently experience, and that is where you're in another location with no PC of your own. Okay, that's sometimes the situation. This could be for a number of reasons. Maybe you just have a laptop that's being repaired, or you just, I don't know, forgot it, something like that. But you always have a flash drive in your pocket. And if you have that, well, then you might be able to use Windows to Go. Another situation is where you have BYO, well, that's actually not B, is it? Not bring your own beer, it's bring your own device, BYOD. In some organizations nowadays, especially with something like a full-time contractor, where you show up to the office every day just like you're a regular employee, you take your lunch in the break room along with all the other employees, and yet you're not an employee. You may have to have your own device. You might be responsible for bringing your own laptop. And in fact, here in the state of Arizona, if a company provides you with a laptop, even if you're a contractor, the state may qualify you as an employee anyway. And so that gets to be in some huge legal issues and benefits issues and stuff like that. So many times, contractors are not allowed to be issued a laptop. So you have to bring your own laptop or bring your own device. Now, this also addresses other situations. So, for example, if I am in someone else's building, I'm not part of that company, but I need to get some work done there, certainly that's understandable, but they might be a little reluctant to loan me a workstation. They might say, hey, you know what, Brad over here in his cubicle, he's on a 2-hour lunch break as usual anyway, so why don't you just sit down at his desk, we'll log you on as his account, and then you can just do whatever you need to, check email, browse the internet, whatever it is. Well, that's a huge security issue. Because I can now, being logged on as Brad, I have access to all the things that Brad has. I have access to his hard drive. If I've got malicious intent, I can do all kinds of damage as Brad. You can see where that goes. So that's really a big issue there. Now, the other thing would be, well, why don't you just tell the IT department to create a user account for our guest? Oh, that's another issue. Now we have to determine what resources that guest has access to. Can they see things that they're not supposed to be able to see? All kinds of issues there. Also, there's a concern for malware or data access. What if we were to gain access to their systems and see data, for example, that we're not supposed to be able to see, or if we browsed Brad's hard disk and saw files that he has there that we're not supposed to be able to access. There's all kinds of issues there. Well, again, with a bring your own device issue, we have a few solutions there that we could work with. One of the solutions would be just remote desktop protocol. You can see here, let me go back to my systems here. For example, here I'm using remote desktop protocol, and there's a number of different ways to do it. But I'm using something that a lot of administrators use, and that's the Remote Desktop Connection Manager. This allows me to connect to multiple other machines in this window. I think I might have shown you this at some previous point in time. Anyway, you can use this, or you can use the version of RDP that comes with a lot of desktop computers like Windows Vista, Windows 8, Windows 7, all of those will have some version of this, and then you can remotely connect to some other machine. So they may have had some machine set up for you there that allows you that access. Or Citrix, again, also, you might have a desktop that's designed specifically for guests. However, a lot of organizations don't have all of that set up for you, just for their guests, or guest virtual machines, all kinds of things like that. So a better solution might be using Windows to Go. Now, using Windows to Go, probably the most common implementation of that will be to use a thumb drive. And you've seen these, they're kind of ubiquitous. They're 32 gigabytes. Okay, that's the size that you need to use as a minimum. And it's going to be better if you use USB version 3.0 or better, if there is a better. Okay, in other words, 3.0 is going to give you the best throughput because it has better performance there. Now, in my case, on some of my machines, I only have USB 2.0 available, and I've used it on 2.0. A little bit slow, but still gets the job done. Now, what this is going to be, it's going to be an entire copy of Windows 8 Enterprise Edition, so Windows 8 Enterprise Edition, on this thumb drive, or flash drive, whatever you want to call it. Now, this installation of Windows 8 Enterprise Edition will have everything you want. It'll have any data files that you can put on there. It's going to be a little bit small-ish, because it's only 32 gigabytes, or even though you can get thumb drives larger. Anyway, it's still a little bit smallish compared to hard drives, but it'll have all of that. It'll have your desktop settings. It'll have anything else that you would normally have in a corporate environment. It's not like a second-rate copy of Windows. It is a full copy of Windows, and you can do everything with that you could on a normal physical workstation. You can also do this on a hard drive, and in fact, in my case, that's what I'm going to have to use because of some virtualization issues. I can't use a flash drive, so I'm using an external hard drive in my demonstrations that I'll show you here in a little while. And of course, that's going to give you more storage, and you have the advantage of that. But these are generally going to be slower, and this will be even more important, I think, to use USB 3.0 on these external hard drives. But those are your two options. The basic idea is that it's going to be plugged into a USB port. So let's go ahead and address just kind of an overview of Windows to Go here and some more details about it. First of all, like I said before, it's an entire copy of Windows 8 Enterprise Edition, including the operating system, any user settings, any wallpapers that you've configured, the shortcuts on your desktop, any applications that you have installed there. You have access to all of that, again, the same as if it were some kind of a desktop computer. And any data that will fit on there, but again, you might be limited to the storage there. One thing that's really cool with this is that you can actually use a reference image. Now, we haven't really discussed that here, but let me give you kind of a quick breakdown on what that is. Let me just create a new page here, and I'll show you what I'm talking about. Here we might have, in an organization, let's say it's a Windows Server 2012 server. And one thing we use on this, there's a few different technologies, but one of them would be Windows Deployment Services, or WDS. And with this, what we can do is we can actually have copies of Windows, Windows 8, or we have copies of Windows 7, copies of Vista. Hopefully not. Copies of course, in our case, you might also have Windows 12 even. Okay, and so what's going to happen there is these copies all exist on the hard drive of this Server 2012, and these would be new installation copies. Now, each one of these could be what we call a reference image. So, for example, with our Windows 8 one, it might have all the programs you need. It might have the corporate desktop. Let me write that again. Desktop, corporate desktop. It might have all kinds of things there that you need in your reference image. Okay, it might have already some pre-shared drives, for example, or some mapped drives, that is. Then what happens is, once this is golden and configured exactly the way we want it, then what we can do is to issue that to multiple other physical desktops. It's just a cloned copy, if you will, that goes to all of these other desktops. And you can even send that to a USB flash drive. Okay? And that could be your Windows to Go installation. So your Windows to Go flash drive over here. Okay. Basically, the idea here is all of these are stored in what we call, all of these over here are stored in what we call WIM files. Something .wim. So Windows 8.wim or something like that. And when you point to that WIM file during the Windows to Go configuration, I'll show you how to do this a little bit later on, it'll take one of these images and plop it over here on this flash drive if you want. Now, that's probably a little bit more information than we have to have for exam purposes. The main idea that they're looking for in the exam probably is going to be that we'll probably point it to the WIM file that exists on the Windows 8 Enterprise DVD. Yes, there's a WIM file there. And it's really just a package of all of the operating system in a single file, and then it's all expanded out here to this flash drive or the USB external hard drive or whatever it is. So what will happen here is you'll take your flash drive, your external hard drive, and you'll plug it into some machine. It could be even your own home machine. Maybe you need to do corporate work from the office, but on your own personal computer. Of course, IT doesn't reach out to your own personal computer at home. But they do have that thumb drive that they've configured for you. So you just plug that in, you boot to it. Now, pretty much you're at work. And you have a work copy of Windows 8. So what you'd have to do is to boot the physical PC to be able to access or boot from that USB flash drive or external hard drive. Again, a 32 gigabyte minimum on these flash drives. Now, you may need to configure the BIOS. There's also an option there in the Windows to Go wizard that I'll show you where it could configure that for you. And it may not work with all BIOS, but hopefully it will do that and make it a little bit easier for you. And then it will configure the BIOS to boot for those external devices. Also, some considerations here. Again, Windows 8 Enterprise. You can't do it with Windows 8 Professional Edition, for example, or Home Edition. Windows Recovery is not available. We'll talk more about this as we go later on. But Windows Recovery is the ability to kind of go back in time to a previous state of Windows. It's kind of a re-imaging, if you will. And that's not really available on a Windows to Go drive. Now, probably the option there would be, if you went back to this scenario here, where we have a corporate image that's a default that we have been issuing to all of our clients. Well, if we've issued that to our flash drive over here, we can, again, of course, just reissue it. Just lay it down again in a new Windows to Go installation, and we would be just fine. Later on, also, we'll be talking about keeping things such as your data and your desktop configuration stored on a central server, which will make that a little bit easier. There's also BitLocker. This is a great technology that will encrypt an entire drive. This might be very useful, for example, for one of the USB flash drives or external hard drives, because they're usually more portable and also easier to lose. And so if somebody else were to grab a hold of that, they might be able to have an entire corporate desktop at their disposal, and they might be able to see certain security secrets that you don't want them to see. So what you can do is to use BitLocker, which encrypts the entire hard drive. Normally we use something called a trusted platform module for that, which is something that's on a motherboard, and it will store the security keys necessary to open up that BitLocker hard drive so that you can actually see it, and so that it doesn't stay permanently encrypted. Well, if you're using this kind of a scenario with Windows to Go, you don't have your own TPM, because you don't even have your own machine that way. We're not going to store the keys there. Instead, what will happen is you can use BitLocker, but it has to have a password. So when you try to unlock that or boot to that Windows to Go drive, you have to enter in the appropriate password. There's also no push button reset. And the push button reset gives you the ability to refresh your PC by reinstalling a factory image, but it will keep all of your user accounts that are there, your data, any Windows Store apps, things like that. Or you could also reset your PC, which is kind of pretty much the same as removing all user data and reinstalling a factory image. But regardless, that's just not available for this Windows to Go. Also, there's no hibernate or sleep, and you can kind of imagine why that would be an issue. I mean, it leaves you in an uncertain state. If you hibernate or sleep the flash drive, and then you realize you have a meeting to go to, you pull the flash drive out, well, kind of what happens there? It really leaves you in a bad situation. It could corrupt the operating system. There's also no internal disks that are visible. So let's say you are borrowing somebody's PC here and as a guest, and you plugged in your flash drive. Well, they have hard disks inside of here, at least one or more, that you don't really want your guest to see. So they don't want you to be able to see that hard drive, and it's invisible when you're using Windows to Go. Also, it's going to load the appropriate drivers when you connect to it. So this might be a Dell, PC, let's say, and it's got a certain, ATI video card, or I don't know what they use, but some kind of a video card, some kind of a hard disk controller. Okay, so it's got all of those sorts of things in there, and of course, all of those things need specific drivers. What will happen here is the Windows To Go will download and install the appropriate drivers so that it can access all of that hardware. Now, you would expect that. However, the next time that it connects to the same machine, it doesn't have to re-download and reinstall all of those drivers. It will just continue to use, it'll just reload those anytime you reconnect. And then likewise, if you connect to some other machine, and maybe this one's an HP, then of course it will download all of the drivers it needs for that one, and then you can just flip back and forth between these two if you wanted to, and it would not have to download any additional drivers. Also, when you decide to use Windows To Go, let's say we're using it on this machine over here, when we adjust the BIOS to boot from our external hard drives or our flash drive, for example, that could be an issue if there's BitLocker also installed on this computer over here. Because BitLocker looks for changes to the BIOS or changes to the boot process, and it will consider that a potential threat to security, and then it would not unlock the system. Or what it would do is it would provide a prompt to the user, and you'd have to enter in a specific combination of key codes or something like that. It can be kind of complicated there. And you wouldn't want to have to do that every time you booted the machine. So what we want to do with this is, if we're going to use our Windows To Go over here, and we're going to adjust the BIOS, first thing you want to do is to suspend BitLocker. And then once you've suspended BitLocker, change the BIOS, then you can re-enable BitLocker, and that way it doesn't see an invasion or a change to the boot process. You only have to do that really the first time, and that's only if you're using BitLocker on this physical machine right here. Okay. All right, let's take a look at how to make Windows To Go work. What we'll simply do is go to our start screen. Of course, you can't find Windows To Go anywhere here, so you're going to have to type it in, Windows To Go. It's under Settings, not Applications. And then we have two options, the second of which, for adjusting these startup options in the BIOS, will be part of the end of the first wizard here on Windows To Go. So we're just going to go to this, and then we'll go ahead and look for the devices. Now, here you can see I've got a couple of devices. There's a USB device here. This tells me in this particular case it's not compatible with Windows To Go, probably because there's not enough space on it. There's also this external hard drive, so I'm going to just go ahead and use that one. Again, this one's not a USB 3.0 drive, but it's telling me that it would be better if it was, so certainly you'd want to do that if possible. Here I've got a Windows 8 Enterprise installation. Let me show you something that's kind of a cool tip with this. If I go into my file system here, I'm just going to go to Browse for my file system here for the ISO file for Windows 8. And down here under Windows 8 RTM, you can see I've downloaded the Windows 8 Enterprise Edition from TechNet. And so what I'll do here is I'll right-click and choose Mount. Now, I've already done that, but once you do that, it mounts it as if it were Shiny Media DVD. That's it right there. It's in a mounted position. What we would have there is something that we would normally have had to do in previous versions of Windows, only through third-party products or something. So I really like that Microsoft has added that. That's why the install.wim file is available for me there, because I mounted that ISO. And then what you can also do is to use BitLocker with your Windows To Go workspace if you want to. I'm not going to use it in my case. Remember, you have to use a password because there's no TPM here. But I'm not going to use it in my case because it takes longer. But otherwise, that would be available. The other thing you could do here is, if you don't want to use it now, you can also add it later on if you want to. But I'm going to go ahead and skip that for the time being and then create my Windows To Go workspace. All right, now, one thing I want to point out is what we're looking at right now is my Windows Server 2012 server running Hyper-V, and most of the demonstrations I show are some virtual machine that you'll see through here. For example, that's one of my main Windows 8 demonstration computers. The reason why I'm here is because I want to make a point. Much of the Microsoft documentation that I've read states that when you plug in the Windows To Go drive, it has to be plugged into a machine that is physically running Windows 7 or Windows 8. My question is, why? When you start Windows To Go, it doesn't even read the previous operating system, whatever's on that physical hardware. It doesn't even matter. There could be no operating system. I've done it on some machines that are running Kali Linux or Backtrack or older versions of Windows. It doesn't really matter. So what I'm going to do here, I'm just going to create something that doesn't even have an operating system. So I'm just going to kind of quickly go here and choose a new virtual machine. And we'll get this launched. Let me just click on next here. And I don't know what to call this. Let's just call this Windows to Go. How about that? For brief, to make it brief, I'll just type WT Go. Oh, that's not right. What the Windows? Let's try this again. WTG. Okay. And then we click on next, and I'll just give it a little bit of memory there. And then I'll just give it a network connection. And we'll just kind of continue on through this. None of this is really particularly important. I'm not even going to install an operating system. This will basically be equivalent to a computer without any hard drive or with no operating system at all. And we just configure the BIOS to boot to the USB. And then here I'm going to give you a little tip. This is a tangent, but bear with me. It could come in handy for you if you work with servers. One of the things that frustrates me about Hyper-V is that you cannot connect an external USB and especially a thumb drive. You cannot connect a thumb drive to a Hyper-V machine. You can do it using a pass-through disk, such as a physical hard disk, that's an external USB disk, and that's what I've got connected right now. So I need to use, where is it? Computer management to get to that. And I'm going to take the disk, which is currently connected to my Hyper-V server. I'm going to take it offline. Once it's offline and not used, then I can connect it to my WTG machine that I just created. And you can see the disk down here. It's disk number 3. So I'm just going to take that offline. And that's all I really need to do for this. Our tangent is almost over, folks. And then I need to go to the properties of this WTG machine. So I'll go to the settings of it, actually. And I'm going to go to the hard drive. So the hard drive right now is WTG. I'm actually going to make it this physical hard disk, which is disk 3. Click OK. Now we should be able to start this up. And what we'll see happen is it's going to boot directly to Windows on that hard drive. But boot to the Windows to Go installation that you saw me create in the wizard. And then we see Windows getting started right here. And then after pausing for a little while to allow the boot to take place, you can see that I now have a desktop. And here we're able to just log on. From this point forward, there's really nothing really new to show. I would just use Windows the same way I would if it were physically installed on an internal hard drive. And I would create documents, save documents. I could change settings, change my wallpaper, all the same stuff that I would do in a normal installation of Windows. Alright folks, we started this video with the discussion of my inadequate dancing skills. And we are going to conclude with that here as well. You see, recently CBT Nuggets had me and several of the other trainers up there to have some meetings, including, let me draw the circles here, Garth Schulte, Chris Ward, Steve Casely over my shoulder, Keith Barker, and Timothy Warner. Of course, there's me right there. And they forced us into doing, they asked us to do this dance. I'm not going to really go through the whole thing here because of, among other things, just the sake of time and so on. But you can see us trying to dance here, and it's really quite ugly. But, oh, look, it's already got, how many views is that? 2,240 views. Wait a minute. Who gave us thumbs down? That's not right. Anyway, in this nugget, what did we discuss? We discussed Windows to Go. And this is a great way to take your corporate desktop anywhere you go. You can take it home, plug it into your home computer or your laptop. And you can also take it to another corporation where you don't have access to a desktop to do your work. And you can instead just plug in your Windows to Go drive and get access to your corporate desktop there. Well, I hope this has been informative for you, and I'd like to thank you for viewing.